So welcome, everybody. Thank you for renaming. We're just going to rename ourselves according to how many students we have in our school currently. And how do you rename yourself? In your Zoom box on the right-hand side, there are 3 dots, and you can rename yourself by clicking rename, and we can see. So Allison, you're wonderful. I already see how many students you have. Let's see how many we have. As well, we have both 2 Allisons have already done it. I'm going to stop talking. I'm first going to introduce Jeremy, who is chair of the Intentionally Small Schools SIG. So Jeremy, I'll let you start off while I just say hello to people.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, at least from my part of the world. I am Jeremy Majeski, the principal at Frankfurt International School's Wiesbaden campus. We are a small school of about 200 students from preschool to grade 8. I'm in my 2nd year in this position. I see a couple of other folks from FIS that have joined the call, and I'm excited to have their voices in on this call as well. I'm really excited to have Nancy here with us today. I'm going to bring us back a little bit of a history. Last fall, as I had landed here from Barcelona into this new small school setting, Sarah and I from ECIS had touched base, and we were talking a little bit about what it was like the first 2 months landing here at this small school. And something that commonly just resonated from conversation after conversation I was having was constantly apologizing for being a small school. Well, we can't do that because we're a small school. We don't have it that way because we're a small school. We do things differently because we don't have this. And you know, it got to the point where it's like, let's stop this narrative about small schools and recognize that small schools have a lot of power. There's a lot behind small schools that make us really wonderful and make us great. And so, you know, Sarah had said, I wonder if there's some other small school leaders out there in the world who would be interested in coming together to join a special interest group to continue just talking and collaborating about small schools. Last year, we did a couple of sessions online through COVID, and some of you folks were there as well. We did another session this past fall, and it was like, okay, let's officially create this small school special interest group through ECIS. And so we just launched our new special interest group last month. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but really the purpose of this online gathering of some like minds is to come together and talk about both the things that we can celebrate in small schools, as well as the things that maybe keep us up at night and learn from one another. And so lots of intention behind the small group today. I am so excited to have Nancy with us today. I actually met Nancy for the first time online last month. And it's funny because I've got a few fan people that I follow on social media. And Nancy has been somebody on Twitter, on LinkedIn that I've followed for quite a while. And I know that she's been quite a voice out there in the world of professional development and the work that she's done. And I reached out to her after a couple of administrators and I had conversations around small schools and leadership structures within them. I think, you know, as a principal, I know that, you know, it's best to have, you know, middle level leadership in the school. It's best to have leaders out there amongst the teaching ranks, you know, teachers making a difference in the school. But I had come from situations in medium-sized to larger schools where I may have had 5 fifth-grade teachers on a team. I assigned one team leader and some really powerful work happened. But what happens when you may only have, you know, 1 fifth-grade teacher, 1 fourth-grade teacher? How do you set up a leadership structure to both support the school as well as, you know, allow teachers to spread their leadership wings at all as well? So I reached out to Nancy. I know that she's done a lot of work and facilitation in this area. I asked her if she would help facilitate this meeting with us today to talk a little bit more about middle level leadership. And so, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us and getting us kick-started on this conversation and see where this takes us.
Wonderful. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here. Really, when it came to middle leadership, this is something I have a true passion for in terms of being a change agent within an organization. But then Jeremy spoke about being within a small school, and I have worked with some small schools. And actually, when I started in Luxembourg, the International School of Luxembourg was 211 students, and that was grades 3 to 18. So it was quite a challenge when I arrived because I was working in a New York public school where there were 1,000 children per grade level. And then I was put into a middle leadership where there was 211. So we had about 1 to 2 grade levels per per classes per grade. So how do you move forward on this? I think the first thing I want to start off with, when I've been fortunate to facilitate with many schools, and I'm only sharing not what I think, it's actually what I've learned from other leaders. And part of this hour is also for you to talk for one another, because you're learning from each other's experiences. Because I always say, everyone in the chat, how many years experience you have in education? In this room, what do you think we have? I know we're also young looking, but I bet we have a couple of 100 years. So what I'm saying is not about it's really what I've learned from others. And the one thing I've learned from others from working with schools is, when looking at small schools, the one message I kept on getting from principals and directors is, we had to start having procedures and protocols in place. So when there was an initiative, when there was a program, it wasn't based on an individual, that it was based upon the organization and it was based upon the institution. Because they said, being such a small school of 200 kids, because right now we have a range of 85 to 500 in this room in terms of school size. That's quite a range. But yet they said, regardless of the range, even if we only had 100 kids in our school, we still needed to have those strategies and protocols. So when someone came into the school, it wasn't, so how do you do it this way? Even if you only had one grade level of each class, how do you do it this way? And the typical response was, when I heard from these directors, is, oh, that's the way we've always done it. I call that a twatty. That's the way we've always done it. And the biggest shift these small schools had was starting documenting procedures and protocols. So how does that align with your thinking right now? And please just unmute yourself in terms of that shift of having conversations because of the personality and trying to get those external data points regardless of your size. Any thoughts? I saw some people nodding, which was great. So I'm not off track so far. And please just unmute and join this conversation. We're kind of a small group. Your thoughts about that in terms of a provocation?
I can
go ahead. Oh, the two Allisons want to speak at the same time.
I love it. So Allison L and then Allison with 200. So we'll go to Allison, please, first.
Okay. No, I completely agree. I think one of the biggest struggles is that schools need capacity to do all the writing and the document, the creation of the procedures, but that has to be the starting point. So you can't tackle it all in one go. But to tackle it, it's the only way to really move forward. Otherwise, you're continuously on a cycle of a single point of failures. So one person leaves or one person's away and everything crumbles in that department. So I think it's about developing the capacity to be able to build these procedures and systems, because without that, it's very difficult to move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Allison. And Allison? And then Scott.
What Allison said.
Oh, ditto. Allison, we love it. Repeat.
No, the only thing I would add is that indeed we've just come out of where we're busy now. We had some procedures obviously for the basics, because we grew very quickly. So the focus was on growing quickly at the beginning stages of the school, which meant that we had very few procedures, which meant that people were doing what they wanted to do as opposed to streamlining and professionalizing. And so that's what we're doing right now, is going through everything and creating the customer journey, as it were, and say, okay, what points do we have, and what policies do we have, where do we need to create policies? And we're trying to evolve the team, especially because we are such small schools. The team, my wonderful team, carry a lot of the work, so they have to be on board from the start.
I agree.
Yeah.
And Scott, you were going to thank you, Allison and Allison. Scott, did I see you going to say something? Should I tell him he's on mute? No. God, we still can't hear you. Or is it just me, everybody?
I don't know why he's muted. I'll just see if I can work on that.
Scott, whatever you're saying, I totally agree with you because I know you. So you're just brilliant. So yes, Scott. Try it then. No, we don't hear you. Sorry, Scott. Allison, you brought up such a good point in terms of capacity. It reminded me when COVID hit. All of a sudden, we need all these virtual protocols, and we were exhausted. So what did we do? I actually reached out to Singapore American School, and they had protocols, and I borrowed from them. So looking what Jeremy just established here with ECIS in terms of a network, this is a point where we start sharing, perhaps creating a resource bank to have, granted, you can't copy everything from another school, but at least you're starting with a foundation in terms of having policies and just ideas in terms of what do you do when your entire lower school team is 6 teachers? How do you decide in terms of working on assessment, moderated grading? How do you do it that way? And maybe this group, this is a starting point in terms of getting those references. So you don't have that, like I said, recreating the wheel when you know, for example, oh, Jean-Pierre already has it at his school. Maybe he could share it and start creating that type of network where you can have those documents shared. The next, so thinking first about having those procedures, you know, there's a great book by Andy Buck, and it's Leadership 3.0. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. And he talks about culture and climate. And he says that culture refers to the way we do things around here. And it kind of emphasized what I mentioned, because he says culture, the way we do things, behave, how we do things, is the behavior, and behavior is based upon the processes, protocols, and procedures you have in place. And if you don't have those processes, procedures, and practices in place, people just do whatever they want to do. So it's, again, what I'm saying was actually reinforced. I just love his book, Leadership 2.0. The next area before I put you into a breakout room is to link of, I always think of the 5 W's of middle leadership, regardless of the school size. And the 5 W's first defines is, why are you even having middle leadership? What is the shared vision? Regardless if the school is 85 or 200 or 2000, what is your rationale to have middle leadership? Where is that documented? So why is it that you need to have a middle leadership program? If that can't be responded to, then you have to question moving forward in terms of that why. It even goes back to the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. We have to know our why. So this relationship, this conversation about middle leadership, I question you when you go back to your leadership teams, why is it you want to move forward? And how will you have agreed upon values and behaviors? And why will this make a difference in terms of impacting student learning? So that would be the first why. The what is really, once you understand your why, how do you, what are they actually going to be doing? A clearly defined job description, expectation, characteristics, and also what training will be provided. I work with middle leaders for the past, since 2013, and usually I always do a survey to start off the session. And the first question I ask is, most middle leaders get hired during the springtime, and then they start their role in September of August. And I ask, how much training did you get in preparation for your middle leader position? Sarah was with me once. There was 36 middle leaders on the session. Can anybody want to guess how many had absolutely no, and there's no fault of anybody. It's just that you get caught at the end of the year. There's IB exams, there's IGCSEs, there's parent conferences. How much training out of 36 participants, how many received training before starting their position as a middle leader? Or how many? 0. Well, 20 had no training, 2 had training. So if you know the why, know the what, so the what goes into what are they going to be doing, their expectations, roles and responsibilities, and what training will be provided. Because you can't expect to put someone in a position that all of a sudden they're not able to fulfill whatever expectations you have. The who refers to who is going to be developing the capacity of middle leadership? Who is going to be that one contact person that becomes that team builder? Now you're thinking, we're a small school, it could be all of us. But at one point that responsibility has to be, and then who do you see within your team in terms of meeting that role in terms of your mission and values? The biggest question, because when it comes to small schools, there's usually sometimes the 3 challenges is time, resources, and budget. So when looking at when a middle leader is going to be expected to be doing their roles and responsibilities, can you afford to have them out of a class? And the one and when has to be embedded in their job. If it's an add-on, they won't be able to meet those expectations in terms of what you want them to do. It will not be feasible for them to do it. When and exactly where refers to culture. And what type of culture? Where can a middle leader strive? How do they reflect your school culture? And where is it within your organization will they fit in? So I just gave you the 5 W's. I hope there were 5. If I did 4, just make believe I gave you another one. So what I would like you to do now, because it's already 18 after I've been speaking for over 10 minutes now. So we talked about why, thinking of why do you even want middle leadership within your school? And is that agreed upon? The what, clearly defined roles, and also what training. The who, 2 aspects. Who in leadership will be providing, developing capacity, and how do you develop that who, that person? When, referring to can you afford to have them out of classes or time? And then finally, where do they fit in within the culture of your school? So we're going to put you into breakout rooms, and your provocation is this. Out of this discussion, what did you agree with? So we're going to do the 4A protocol from National School Reform. What did you agree with? You can only pick one, or maybe you could pick 2. What do you argue with? Saying Nancy was just off the mark on that one. Like, what do you assume? What assumptions did I make? And remember, this is all in positive intent. This is a discussion, and then we're going to come back in. And what do you aspire to in terms of moving your school forward? Is it just getting your why? Getting that common agreement of the rationale to have middle leadership. Before moving to what they're doing, we need the why. How are we feeling about this? Thumbs up? Are we good? I even see some smiles. Thank you, Jane. Love the smile. You just made me happy. So we're going to put you in. And Jeremy, how much time would you like them to be in their rooms? What would you suggest?
I'd like to have some good conversation, maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
Ooh, okay, love that. So everyone, you have 4 A's. If you're not sure, you can do another A. But I think about 17 minutes then. So it's 20. So they'll come back about 22. Is that okay, Jeremy?
Sure, sounds good.
And Sarah, small groups of 4, if that's possible.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Everyone introduce yourself, say hello, enjoy, and we'll see you in about 18, 20 minutes. And remember, pick one of those A's, or you can also pick up on what we talked about earlier about structures and protocols that need to be in place rather than having a personality in terms of being part of an organization. Okay, enjoy everybody. It's nice to see you. We'll see you in about 15, 20 minutes.
Sarah, is it possible to pause the recording and then be able to come back on,
Sure.
since we're going to be posting this online?
Welcome back, everybody. I always hate that quick jolt out of a breakout room. It's always, it cuts right in the middle of a conversation, a sentence, whatever it might be, every single time. All right, welcome back. All right, so as we all come back to the larger breakout room, we've got about 15, 20 minutes left to go for this meeting. I've got a couple of questions I'd like to throw out to the group. But before I do, Nancy, I wanted to throw this question out to you. As I was listening to some of the groups talk, can you help us define what you see as middle level leadership? Who are these people in our school? Just so that we're really clear on the same vernacular around what we're talking about.
Great question. First of all, the most important thing is whatever definition you have, there's a common understanding within your organization that first of all, usually a middle leader is any teacher who takes on additional responsibilities outside of teaching. So it could be in terms of pastoral care, teaching and learning. It's those additional responsibilities. Then what really differentiates middle leaders is if you want their work to be transactional versus transformative. So transformative is looking at the idea that when they are working with their team, there's a change in beliefs, behaviors, or a state of being. If you want transactional, that's purchase orders, that's scheduling, that's putting the books away, that's cleaning up the book room. So you as an organization need to decide where is it that you want that middle leader to be? And then that goes to the what. What is their roles and responsibility? But before that is the why. Why do you want them? Is it transactional or transformative? So to go back to your question, it's really any additional responsibilities or duties that a teacher has been appointed to do as a middle leader. And there's different terminologies. There could be a coordinator that's a middle leader. There are teacher leaders, they're called, head of departments. There's different terminologies to cover that umbrella of a middle leader.
Perfect. Thank you. Mike, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something. I love that I believe Allison shared it. So Allison was sharing empowering the leader without title, right? That it's not, it doesn't have to be called something or have a stipend or anything, but setting the culture around creating impact and supporting people to grow organically from within to make that impact. Same skills and stuff necessary for the middle level leaders. Did I capture that right, Allison?
Yeah, thank you. I think there are three Allisons in this conversation. That has to be confusing, and I don't think it's happened to me before in one of these workshops. Yeah, absolutely. So just saying, before we protocol everything, before we get everything down into a process, and that I have a luxury of knowing the school for quite a long time and being able to allow things to come out organically before we give it a job title and look about if this is a long-term position that we're going to need.
I appreciate that model of letting things happen organically at first. Sometimes that's part of the innovation process to see what works. You know, I often do that in my leadership. I'll give things a try. And if it looks like, you know, after that little test run, it's worthwhile, it's come to fruition, then yeah, finally putting a stamp on it and saying, yes, that's something that we want to be part of our group. I think that's interesting. I have a question. So opening the floor up a little bit, two big questions for you right now. So individually, what's working for you currently in your school? What is, you know, rather than focusing on structures that don't work or aren't working, do you have an idea or structure that you feel that's working well in your context in your small school? And if so, please go ahead and unmute yourself and share that with all of us. Uh-oh, that's why you're all here.
And in our conversation, we talked about the benefit of being a small school in that we can leverage our context and the smaller numbers to do some pretty exciting and innovative things, such as what I was describing earlier. With our new schedule, it's afforded us to have one full day where we can devote that to project-based learning and deep inquiry. That's something that simply the larger campus that which we are attached can't do because of size and logistics. I should say yet, because I think that it's something that they would definitely like to do now, having seen how successful it's become at the smaller campus. So it's not been without its challenges, but it's far more possible in a smaller context to be able to provide such opportunities and simply organize logistics around because of the people and also because of the amount of students that we have, and can specifically personalize learning opportunities for those students based on their individual interests.
Can I ask how that impacted the space that you have? Did you have to change the space to have that one day of project learning?
No, because we're quite fortunate in that only a couple of years ago, a new beautifully renovated innovative space was built where it's predominantly utilizing spaces for design tech, 3D printing, visual arts, music. We're now going to be moving our STEM lab into the same area. So we actually do have an additional space, but to be honest with you, regardless of whether we had that space or not, to me, that's a bonus. It's not something necessary from which you need to then organize such an opportunity, such a day in your schedule. I think if you have the people and you have space at all, you can re-envision how those spaces are being used. And that's what we've done. A lot of our kids are using that space, but some of them on day 8 are actually going to the forest to explore outdoor learning in connection with their personal interests. Or they may be brought into the local community to work with different people who they seek interest in, or in an area to pursue. It's not really about the space, it's more about re-envisioning ideas and learning pursuits in my experience anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate Joya's voice in the conversation. Just so you know, Joya's the associate principal at my school. She's right next door. And so she and I work together. We're a wonderful team. Allison, you were going to chime in, and I was just going to build on a couple things from that. I just related to the schedule and the timetable. Something that's really worked for us to change the culture a little bit is to make sure that there is what we call professional learning time, or professional and collaboration time. And it's in everybody's timetable, and it's defined in a way that you can only deal with the thing. It's not that transactional time. We're not planning events. We're getting together to look at student work and moderate together. So the importance of having it built into the timetable and defining that time has been working to help in that space, as well as distributing actual line management responsibilities to some of the middle leaders very carefully and very appropriately, but in a place where they can then start to try to coach a couple of people and work with and have that responsibility, so they do feel empowered with a couple of those people to lead in that space. So those two things have been helping so far. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think, looking at somebody's school schedule without any words attached to it other than what you say in the schedule, the timetable, should be able to communicate the values of the school. And unless there's time in there for some planning or work between some teachers or leaders, it's not something that your school is saying that they attest to. One of the things I was going to share briefly, Joya and us, our journey the last 2 years with leadership, and maybe this will spark some ideas. Last year we entered our small school here in an environment where we had teacher leaders set up. Basically, we had one for primary years, one for middle years, one for upper years. The middle school, we had somebody who was overseeing ELA and learning support as well. What we saw, and we had walked into a structure where these folks were in charge of more of those transactional things, as I hear as Nancy had talked about. So they were setting up field trips, they were taking care of, recess duties, all of those types of things. But I think about the idea of leveraging our leadership structures, and in small schools, can we change those leadership structures based on what we need at that time? And so we were undergoing a big shift in our curriculum and how we approach teaching and learning. And so we felt that we took away those leadership positions, kind of overseeing that transactional stuff, and focused a lot more on leadership within the curricular areas. And so we now have leads in math, in science, in different areas, and we're meeting with them on a regular basis as curriculum coordinators. That has generally worked. We have seen some great strides in the curriculum on campus. But what's interestingly enough is I feel like, and the teachers have reported back, that they're still missing that leadership of the homeroom teacher. How do they get their voice out there? How can they help support, the initiatives and the work that we do, but in a way where they're overseeing 3 or 4 different grade levels. And so that's, we see a positive out of what we're doing, but then there's also that, how do we get that other voice at the table, and what would they do? I think that's something that we're struggling with here at FISW. What else? Any other ideas out there?
We've shifted. We spent a lot of time at the start of the year talking about this notion of collaborative planning time, and we unpacked that with our teams, and we've come to a point now where it is collaborative time, because there was, the sense of, when do we get the time to reflect? When do we get the time to do this or do that? We felt that our planning times, as they were very much about putting the unit out on the table or bringing up title and putting it out and planning. And we've come to a different set of expectations within our teams of, this is collaborative time, of which it needs to involve reflection as well as sharing of good practice, as well as planning. so that it's I won't say it's completely reconfigured, but it's reconfiguring the time that we have, because we all know that time is gold. But there's assumptions there. Well, this is what it's for. It's for planning. It's more than that, and we have to reconfigure it. So we've done a lot of work around creating clarity around that with all the teams involved in that, and it's brought out different talents in different grade level groups, or be they small grade level groups of teachers, because some people are very good at facilitating reflective conversations or coaching conversations or the planning conversations as well.
Scott, who when you talk about teams, who are those teams?
So there are teaching teams.
How do you have them segregated or sectioned out?
We have them sectioned out in early years K. We have 1 and 2. We have 3, 4, and 5, and then we have our middle years teams. So our middle years team, we've got a very small cohort of middle years kids, 65 kids, and so they work as a whole team from 6 to 10.
Okay. Anything else out there? What's working for you, or what is an idea that you heard perhaps in a small group that you will steal or borrow?
If I could just pop in a response to what Nancy was saying about this idea of transformative and transactional. One thing that I've noticed is we're saying in our conversation, we have a quite flat hierarchy in our small school, which is really nice. We often work across lots of different disciplines because we're all just interested, and we've got small classes. There's not many of us as teachers. So we just want to do it. It's nice. And we luckily have the time to do that. But the thing that really pops into my head a lot of the time when I talk to people working in bigger schools is this idea that they often feel like they lack authority to make change. And I remember reading in the, I think it was leading 360 or something, or leading from the middle or something. There was a conference about this a while ago, and it popped into my head then as well, this same idea of when you're a middle leader, you're often trying to be transformative without authority, effectively, and you have to bring a lot of people along with you on that journey, and that can be quite hard at first, obviously. But then you're building a bit of a momentum from the middle, and then I don't know, it's like it warms up, and then it kind of radiates outwards, and then senior leaders start seeing some kind of change, and they go, if they weren't on board before, then they go, oh, okay, this is actually quite good. We've got people that are making some change here. That's effective. But what I often wonder is it possible in an environment that has a purely transactional view to really make that kind of impact, or do you need a little bit of give already when you come into the environment in order to kind of wedge yourself into that and then prise it open a little bit more? I've often wondered whether there's a kind of sticking point there.
I think there is, and I think it's trust. How much trust is in your culture as a school, as a faculty within the school? I think that's key, because leaders need to trust to let go, as in the same way that those middle leaders and teachers in general need to trust that their ideas will be valued and that they can become transformational. But none of that can happen unless you've got a good dispositional, solid quality of trust within your community.
Jean-Pierre, you mentioned something so beautiful. When I work with, I do the ECIS middle leader course, and so many times the middle leaders would say, Nancy, I can't do this. My principal wouldn't agree with this. My director wouldn't agree with this. And we talk about sphere of influence. Do it within your own team. See the power of it. See the idea that we talk about, the idea of human capital, developing human capital, then social capital, then professional capital. And that seems to inspire them, saying, I can't do it, I'm not allowed. And I'm like, oh, they say that, but then we're like, but my team, I said, then just work with your team and you can see the smiles. So what you said is so true. And then you're right. All of a sudden the principal's coming by and they're like, oh, they're moderated grading. They're using a protocol. Where do they get this from? And it's uplifting for them to know that. I think Mike said it before, like some of them are doing this. They don't have a title. They just want to make a difference. They know this conversation will make a difference on student learning. And that's why you're there. And you can see the genuine, just the happiness they get from seeing that difference with their colleagues. And that's what it's about when you talk about those conversations. And it's happiness. I know that sounds simple, but it's just happiness to see those teachers knowing they're making a difference. But originally they said no, because their principal would not allow it. And I was like, do it anyway, but don't tell them I said so. Shh, just try it. It's your team.
Nancy, I think you're right. I was gonna just pipe in and say it's really about influence. And that is something that middle leaders can really leverage. Having been a middle leader for many years myself, it was definitely, there was a lot of push and pull, but that is where I learned a lot about how to use that sphere of influence. And I think that what's equally important, though, I do want to mention, I'm hearing a few times about how there's people who really just want to make the school a better place, and they just want to leverage their skills. But I think it's important that we also recognize them and work to lift them up as well, because you do that too often and you leverage your influence, but when you're not acknowledged or not lifted, that can also create some resentment. And that's something I think in a small school, you need to be particularly acute to, because so many people are spread thin and being utilized in ways that, yes, they want to, but we need to recognize them and lift them.
I think we
Joy,
will. I think we will end on that note. Joya, thank you for that. We only have an hour today. I think the conversation is just getting started, and I would love another hour with you all. Nancy has put together a Padlet. Nancy, if you can drop that in the chat, I believe, just of some places that perhaps we can collate some resources together. So, thinking about, job profiles for middle-level leaders within your schools, what does that look like? Perhaps, adding a document that just explains your leadership structure. Who do you have within your building that have kind of official titles? I think all of that will help us. I'll also follow up in an email with everybody as well, some of these resources and kind of a call to collate some of that. I wanted to give a quick plug for our special interest group. So right now I am the committee chair. I'm the only one running things. Currently, we are looking for other committee members who are interested in joining me in planning out a year to 2 years down the road of where is this special interest group going? What is our vision? And thinking about next steps. If you are a member of an ECIS school and you've got that interest in jumping up, please reach out to me. All of the information is found on our ECIS SIG website, as well as some of our previous webinars that you might be able to take a look at as well. That could be beneficial to you. So I did want to stop on time here and say thank you, Nancy, so much for your insight and having the conversation started with us. I hope to get us together at least one more time before the end of the school year. This is a great group of folks who continue to come back to support one another. So I thank you for that. All right. Thank you, ECIS, for your support as well. All right, folks, have a great afternoon, evening. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Nice to
Thank
see
you,
you,
Nancy.
Allison.
Fabulous. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Laura.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Tanya. Bye, Jane. Bye, Mick and Christine.